The silent roar drifted in open space, far from any planet or station. Surrounded by nothing but stars, Yanhua sat in the co-pilot seat, watching the navigation display while Deho ran diagnostics on their damaged systems. The ship had survived the battle, but barely hull breaches had been patched with emergency sealant. 3 of their weapon systems were offline. The port engine made a concerning sound whenever they exceeded half thrust. "We need a proper repair dock," Yanhua observed. "We need a lot of things." Deho agreed. "Money to pay for repairs, a contract to earn that money, maybe a vacation that does not involve war." Do humans take vacations? Occasionally. When the universe stops trying to kill us for 5 minutes. Yanhua smiled. She still was not used to how easily Deho made her smile a year ago. She had forgotten how, "I have been thinking about what I told my brother," she said, "about finding others like me, people rejected by their own kind." "Yes. I know it sounds idealistic, perhaps foolish." Deho turned from his diagnostics to face her. His wounds had been treated properly once they left Valorian space, but he still moved carefully, favoring his left side where the sorry blade had gotten too close. "It does not sound foolish," he said. "It sounds like you." "What does that mean?" "It means you see value where others see problems. You find strength where others see weakness." He paused, then added, "It is one of my favorite things about you." Yanhua felt warmth spread through her chest. She had learned many things about humans over the past year. She had learned about their violence and their kindness, their stubbornness and their loyalty, their capacity to see a discarded princess and offer her a choice instead of a command. She had learned that Deho specifically was not good at expressing emotions through words. He showed how he felt through actions, through small kindnesses and unwavering support and a willingness to fly into war for people who had never shown him anything but contempt. "I want to continue working with you," she said. "I assumed that was the plan. I want to make sure you want the same thing." Deho was quiet for a moment. "When I pulled you out of that throne room a year ago, I thought I was doing a good deed," he said, "helping someone escape a bad situation, then moving on with my life. And now I cannot imagine doing this without you." He met her eyes. "You are my partner, Yanhua, not because I saved you or because you saved me, but because we work together in a way that makes both of us better. Even when I make you fly into planetary sieges, especially then." "Keeps life interesting." A notification chimed on the communication panel. Yanhua checked it and found a message from Captain Minjun. She is asking if we want to join her crew for a convoy escort job. Yanhua reported, "Good pay, low danger. Sounds boring." She also mentions there is a passenger on the convoy who needs transport to a colony on the frontier, a young Krellian who was exiled from his homeworld for refusing to participate in their ritual combat traditions. Deho raised an eyebrow. Exiled for refusing violence. Apparently Krellians consider pacifism a form of genetic defect. That sounds familiar. Yanhua nodded. "I thought so too." They looked at each other, and an understanding passed between them that required no words. This was how it would begin, not with grand declarations or elaborate plans, but with one person at a time, one rejected soul who needed someone to see their worth. "Accept the job," Deho said. "Already done." The silent roar turned toward its new heading. Engines humming despite their damage. Yanhua began calculating optimal routes while Deho returned to his repairs. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken things that did not need to be spoken. When the young Krellian boarded their ship 2 days later, he looked exactly like Yanhua had felt when she first stepped onto the silent roar, lost and ashamed and expecting cruelty. Deho offered him the same thing he had offered. Here, a cabin with a lock that worked from the inside, a chance to figure out What he wanted, no demands, no expectations. Just space to become whoever he chose to be. Krillion's name was Jinho, and he cried when Daeho told him he did not have to fight if he did not want to over the following months. Word spread through the darker corners of the galaxy. There was a human ship that took in strays, a scarred mercenary and a Valorian princess, who had built something unprecedented. Were not a rescue operation or a charity. They were a crew that grew slowly, carefully. One misfit at Atima, the sorry engineer, who had been cast out for questioning her government's expansionist policies, a pair of Meridian twins born with a genetic condition that made them unable to interface with their species hiveman, the human teenager who had run away from a colony that wanted to force him into military service. Each one found their way to the silent roar. Each one was offered the same choice. Yanhua had been offered stay or go. But either way, you are worthy of respect. The ship grew crowded. Daeho complained about the base noise and the drain on resources, and the fact that he could never find anything in his own cargo bay anymore. But Yanhua noticed how he smiled when their makeshift family gathered for meals, how he took time to teach each new arrival something useful, how he never once suggested turning anyone away. You know, she said one evening, watching their crew play a complicated card game that combined rules from 6 different species. I never thanked you properly. For what? For that first day? When you refused to take me as property? Daeho shrugged. Anyone would have done the same. That is not true, and you know it. He was quiet for a moment. My grandmother used to say that how you treat people who cannot help you shows who you really are. He finally said, when I saw you in that throne room, surrounded by people who thought you were worthless, I saw someone who deserved better. You did not know me. I did not need to know you. I just needed to see you. Yanhua reached out and took his hand. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact between them. Daeho looked at their intertwined fingers, then at her face. Is this a human custom I should know about? He asked, though his voice was lighter than usual. This is a Yanhua custom, she replied. I am expressing affection for my partner. Ah, well, in that case, he squeezed her hand gently. I accept your custom. They sat together watching their crew argue about card rules and cheat at dice and laugh at jokes in 5 different languages. The silent roar was no longer a mercenary vessel with one lonely occupant. It was a home, and Yanhua, the defective princess who had been given away like unwanted baggage, had helped build it. The galaxy was vast, and often cruel species rejected their own for countless reasons, discarding anyone who did not fit their narrow definitions of worthy. But out here, in the space between stars, a human and a Valorian had created something different, a place where the rejected could become family, where the worthless could discover their worth, where anyone, no matter how broken they felt, could find a hand reaching out to help them stand. Yanhua did not know where their journey would take them next. She did not know what challenges waited in the darkness between worlds, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was exactly where she was meant to be, and she had never been happier. The stars stretched endlessly before them, full of people waiting to be found. The silent roar flew on. The final assault on the Valorian capital began at dawn. General Taiwan had gathered his remaining forces for one decisive push against the palace, determined to end the siege before his supply problems became critical. He did not know that the sorry allies had already written him off as a useful fool, whose purpose was nearly complete. He did not know that 47 humans were about to teach him why their species had earned the name Deathworlders. Yanhua coordinated from the silent roar in high orbit, her tactical displays showing the entire battlefield in real time, had positioned the human ships in a wide arc around the capital. ready to strike from multiple angles once the fighting Begandeo was on the ground. He had insisted on leading the assault personally, arguing that the human mercenaries needed one of their own at the front. Bienwa had wanted to argue to keep him safe on the ship where she could protect him. But she understood leadership meant sharing the risks. All teams report ready. Captain Minjin's voice crackled over the command channel. Waiting for your signal. Princess. The title still felt strange. Anhua had spent so long being told she was unworthy of it that hearing others use it with respect made something ache in her chest. Hold positions until Taiwan commits his reserves. She instructed. We need him fully engaged before we strike on the ground. General Taiwan's forces surged toward the palace walls. Loyalist defenders fought back with desperate energy. Knowing this was their last stand, plasma fire lit up. The morning sky explosions shook buildings that had stood for centuries. Yunhua watched the battle unfold and waited for the moment. She had calculated there Tao sent his reserve units forward, committing everything to break through the eastern gate. Now, Yanhua commanded. All teams engage. Priority targets are the Sari communication nodes and command vehicles. 12 human ships descended from orbit like avenging spirits. They hit the Sari positions first, destroying the observation posts and relay stations that allowed the consortium to monitor the battle without those eyes. The Thazari commanders were blind. Then the ground team's Mavadea led a strike force of 15 humans through the industrial district, flanking Taiwan's main force. They moved with the brutal efficiency that made other species fear humanity. Where Valorians fought with elegant precision, humans fought like their homeworld had taught them. Every advantage exploited, every dirty trick employed, every moment of hesitation punished. Dienhua guided them through the chaos. Deho, armor column approaching from the north. Redirect through the foundry, and you can hit their rear. Copy that, Captain Minjin. Anti-aircraft battery at grid 7. Take it out before it targets our transports. On it. Team 3. You have civilians trapped in the market square. I am finding you a path to evacuate them. She was everywhere at once, her mind processing information faster than any computer, seeing patterns that no one else could see. The tide of battle began to turn. Taiwan's forces found themselves surrounded. Their communications jammed. Their Zazari support mysteriously absent. The general himself tried to rally his troops, but confusion spread faster than his orders. Then the Zari betrayal came, just as Yanhua had predicted. The consortium decided that Taiwan had outlived his usefulness. Teshari ships in orbit opened fire on his command positions, eliminating their puppet before he could become a liability. The traitor general died, never knowing he had been a pawn all along. But the Thazari were not finished with Taiwan gone. They began their true invasion. Warships descended toward the capital, carrying enough troops to overwhelm the exhausted defenders. All ships engaged the Zari fleet. Yanhua ordered, buy time for the ground evacuation. There are too many of them. One of the captains reported. We cannot hold them. We do not need to hold them. Yanhua said, we need to delay them long enough for me to reach the palace. She was already moving toward the Silent Roar's cockpit. Yanhua, what are you doing? Deho's voice crackled over the comm. Strained from combat. Something stupid, she admitted. I am coming down. The orbital zone is a war zone. I know. She had run the calculations 100 times in her head. There was exactly one path through the Thasari fleet. One narrow window where their formation created a gap. It would require perfect timing and a pilot willing to fly through. Yanhua was not a great pilot, but she was a great tactician. And sometimes knowing exactly where to go mattered more than how well you could fly. Silent Roar dove toward the planet. Thasari ships fired at her, but she had predicted their targeting patterns. She wove through the barrage with movements that should have been impossible. following the path her mind had calculated. Ship shuddered as near misses scorched her hull alarms screamed warnings. About stress damage and heat buildup, Yin War ignored them all. She broke through the atmosphere and aimed for the palace courtyard. The landing was not graceful. The silent roar came down hard, crushing an ornamental garden and sliding across polished stone before finally stopping against a fountain. Yin was out of her seat before the engines finished. Cycling down, Deha met her at the cargo ramp. He was covered in blood, most of it not his own, and he looked at her with an expression caught between fury and relief. That was insane, he said. That was necessary, she replied. Palace is surrounded and Xianwu cannot hold much longer. Then let us finish this. They fought their way through palace corridors. Together, Dehao handled the combat while Yanhua guided them around enemy positions. Loyalist soldiers joined them as they advanced, recognizing the human mercenary who had become legend over the past weeks. The throne room doors were barricaded inside. Prince Sanwu and his remaining guards made their last stand against the Zari infiltrators who had breached through the servant passages. Dehao kicked open the bay doors. What followed was violence that Yanhua knew she would remember for the rest of her life. The Zari were professional soldiers, trained and equipped and confident, but they had never faced a human fighting to protect people he cared about. Dehao moved through them like a force of nature. He took wounds that should have stopped him and kept fighting. He broke bones and shattered weapons and left enemies wondering how anything could be so relentless. Yanhua saw the Zari commander slipping toward Xianwu with a blade drawn. Her brother was wounded, barely standing, unable to defend himself. She did not think she moved to combat training Dehao had given her over the past year took over. She intercepted the commander, blocked his strike, and drove her own blade into the gap in his armor. But the Zari fell. Xianwu stared at his sister with an expression of pure shock. You saved me, he said. Do not make me regret it. Yanhua replied. The battle for the palace ended when human reinforcements arrived. Captain Minjin's forces had broken through the Zari landing zone and were sweeping the grounds by midday. The capital was secured. The Zari fleet, faced with unexpected resistance and the loss of their ground commanders, retreated to regroup. The war was not over, but the invasion had been stopped. Prince Xianwu, now Emperor Xianwu by grim default, stood in the ruins of his throne room and addressed the survivors. He kept every promise he had made to Yanwei, declared her fully royal. He abolished the gifting of people as rewards. He apologized publicly and sincerely for how she had been treated. Then he offered her something she had not asked for. Stay, he said. I need advisors I can trust, and there is no one whose strategic mind I trust more than yours. Yanhua looked at her brother. She saw genuine regret in his eyes, genuine desire to make amends. A year ago, she would have given anything to hear those words. No, she said. Xianwu blinked. No, I have a home, Yanhua explained. I have a partner and a purpose and a life I built for myself. I did not save you to become a courtier again. Then what will you do? Yanhua glanced at Dehao, who was getting his wounds treated by a palace medic and pretending not to listen. There are others like me, she said. People rejected by their own kind because they are different. People waiting for someone to see their worth. I'm going to find them. Xianwu was quiet for a long moment. The Empire owes you a debt that can never be repaid, he finally said. I will not forget that. Sister, see that you do not. She turned and walked toward Dehao, toward the silent roar, toward whatever came next. 1 year changed everything. Yanhua had arrived on the silent roar as a discarded princess with nothing but her clothes and her shame. Now she sat in the co-pilot seat with confidence, her fingers dancing across tactical displays, her mind constantly analyzing threats and opportunities that Deho had learned to trust completely. They had built a reputation together. The human mercenary and his Valorian partner had become known across 3 sectors as reliable, effective, and surprisingly ethical. They took contracts that other mercenaries avoided, jobs that required precision instead of brutality, situations that demanded someone who could think 5 moves ahead. Yanwa provided the strategy. They provided the execution. Together they had never failed a contract. Message arrived on a Tuesday. Yanwa was reviewing potential jobs when the emergency channel crackled with a priority transmission. The seal was Valorian Royal, and seeing it made her stomach clench. "What is it?" Deho asked, noticing her sudden stillness. "A message from home," she said. "From my brother's court. Do you want to open it?" Yanwa hesitated. For a year she had not thought about the Valorian Empire. Except as a place she had escaped, she had built a new life, found purpose and partnership in something that felt dangerously close to happiness. Opening that message felt like inviting poison back into her blood, but curiosity won. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a Valorian advisor she vaguely recognized. His face was drawn with fear. "Princess Yanwa." The recording began. "I send this message without authorization because our empire is falling, and those who should act are paralyzed by protocol." Yanwa leaned forward. "A coup has begun against the royal family." The advisor continued. "General, Taiwan has allied with the Vasari Consortium to seize the throne. They have already taken the outer provinces and are advancing on the capital." "Vasari," Deho muttered. "The same ones from the station attack. Your brother Prince Yanwu is besieged in the palace." The message went on. "The Emperor and First Prince were killed in the initial assault. The second prince has fled to unknown regions. Sanwu is now the legitimate heir and the last hope of the loyalist forces." Yanwa felt nothing at the news of her father's death. He had never acknowledged her existence except to express disappointment. But the scale of what she was hearing made her mind race. "We have intercepted Dasari communications," the advisor said. "This is not merely a coup. It is an invasion disguised as internal conflict. The consortium plans to absorb Valorian territory once General Taiwan has eliminated the royal bloodline." The recording flickered. "I do not know if this message will reach you, Princess. I do not know if you care what happens to an empire that rejected you, but if there is any part of you that still remembers our people, we need help." The transmission ended. Silence filled the cockpit. Teo waited, watching Yanwa process what she had heard. "They threw you away," he said. "Finally, they did. They called you defective and handed you over like unwanted cargo." "Yes, and now they want you to save them." Yanwa turned to face him. "They do not want me," she said. That advisor sent a desperate message to anyone who might listen. "He does not expect me to do anything, but you are thinking about it. I am thinking about the innocent people who will die in this war." Yanwa admitted, "Servants and merchants and children who have nothing to do with royal politics. They will suffer whether I act or not." Deho nodded slowly. "What do you want to do?" There it was again, the question no Valorian had ever asked her until she met this human. "I want to help," Yanwa said. "Not for my brother, not for the empire that rejected me, but for the people who never had a choice in any of this. Then we help." Deho said simply, "Just like that. Just like that." "This is not a security contract," Yanwa warned. "This is a war. The Dasari are ruthless, and General Taiwan has the loyalty of half the military. We cannot do this alone." Deho smiled. "Who said anything about alone?" Over the next 3 days, Yanwa watched her partner call in favors she had not known he possessed. Human mercenaries from a dozen systems answered his communications. Veterans of conflicts she had only read about agreed to join what Deho was calling a consulting operation. By the time the silent roar set course for Valorian space, they had assembled a force of 47 humans and 12 shipset. was a tiny army by any standard, but Yanhua had studied enough military history to know that numbers meant nothing without strategy, and strategy was what she did best. She analyzed every piece of intelligence they could gather. She studied General Taiwan's past campaigns and identified his patterns. She mapped the Thesari, supply lines and communication relays, and she found the weakness she had been looking for. They are being fed false information. She told Deho and the assembled captains during a strategy session that the Thesari are manipulating Taiwan, making him believe loyalist forces are weaker than they actually are. "How does that help us?" asked Captain Minjin, a scarred woman who commanded a heavy gunship. "It means Taiwan is overextended." Yan explained. "He is pushed toward the capital faster than his supply lines can support because he thinks he is facing minimal resistance. So we hit the supply lines." Deho said, "We hit everything." Yanhua corrected. "Supply lines, communication relays. The Thesari observation posts. We do not engage Taiwan's forces directly. We make him blind and hungry. Death by 1,000 cuts." Captain Minjin said approvingly. "A Valorian who thinks like a human. I like it." Yanhua was not sure if that was a compliment, but she accepted it as one. The campaign began. 12 human ships scattered across Valorian space, striking targets that Yanhua identified with surgical precision. They destroyed supply convoys before they could reach the front lines. They disabled communication satellites that the Thesari were using to coordinate with Taiwan. They raided observation posts and captured intelligence that revealed even more about the enemy's plans. General Taiwan's advance slowed. His forces began to struggle without the supplies they expected, and in the besieged capital, Loyalist defenders found themselves facing weaker attacks than they had feared. Prince Xianwu sent desperate messages asking who was conducting these operations. Hua did not respond. Not yet. She was not ready to speak to her brother until she had leverage. That leverage came when Captain Minjun captured a Thesari commander during a raid on a communication hub under interrogation. The commander revealed the full scope of the consortium's plans. Once Taiwan eliminated the royal family, the Thesari would betray him and install their own puppet government. The Valorian Empire would become a Thesari territory. "We need to warn Taiwan," Daho said when Yanhua shared this information. "He is a traitor and a murderer, but if he realizes that the Thesari are planning to betray him, he might turn against them." "Perhaps," Yanhua agreed. "But first I need to speak with my brother." She recorded a message and sent it to the palace through channels only royal family members knew. Prince Yanwu responded within the hour. His D's face appeared on the display, haggard and afraid, nothing like the arrogant royal who had given her away a year ago. "Sister," he said, "I did not believe the reports. They said a Valorian woman was coordinating the attacks on the Thesari positions, but I never imagined that it was me." Yanwu finished, "That your defective sister was capable of anything useful." Xianwu flinched. "I have terms." Yanwu continued, "If you want my continued assistance, you will agree to them. Name them. First, formal recognition of my full royal status. All records of my supposed deficiency will be destroyed. Agreed. Second, abolition of the practice of gifting people as rewards. No Valorian will ever be given away like property again." Xianwu hesitated, then nodded. Agreed. Third, a public apology for how I was treated, delivered by you personally to the court. Once this is over, you ask me to humiliate myself. I ask you to acknowledge the truth." Yanwu said, "You gave me to a stranger because you thought I was worthless, and that stranger showed me more respect in 1 hour than my family showed me in my entire life." Xianwu was silent for a long moment. "Agreed." He finally said, "All your terms are agreed. Now tell me how my powerless sister became the person holding my fate in her hands." Yanwu smiled. "I was never powerless," she said. You just never bothered to look closely enough to see what I could do." She ended the transmission and turned to find Daeho watching her with something like pride in his eyes, ready for the final phase. He asked. Yanhua nodded. "Let us end this war." The Silent Roar was not a pretty ship. Daeha had bought her 7 years ago from a salvage yard on the edge of human space, and he had spent every year since then keeping her functional through determination and duct tape and occasional profanity. She was boxy where other ships were sleek. Her hull was scarred from dozens of firefights. Her interior smelled like recycled air and engine grease, and the particular staleness of a vessel that had been home to a single occupant for too long. Yanhua stood in the cargo bay and tried to process her new reality. 24 hours ago, she had been a princess of the Valorian Empire. Even if she was a disgraced one, now she was standing in the belly of a human ship with nothing but the clothes she wore and a future she could not predict. "Crew quarters are this way," Daeho said, leading her through a narrow corridor. "Bathroom is shared, but I will work out a schedule so you have privacy. You do not need to concern yourself with my comfort." "I am not concerning myself with your comfort," Daeho replied. "I am being a decent person," which is apparently a foreign concept in your brother's court. Yanhua did not know how to respond to that. Daeha stopped at a door and opened it to reveal a small cabin with a bed, a desk, and a storage compartment. "This is yours," he said. "The lock works from the inside, and I will not enter without permission." "Why would you give me a lock?" Daeho looked at her with an expression she could not read. "Because everyone deserves a space that belongs only to them," he said. "Get some rest if you can. We are jumping to hyperspace in an hour." He left her. Yanhua sat on the edge of the bed and waited for something terrible to happen. She waited for Daeho to return with demands. She waited for the lock to fail, for the kindness to reveal itself as a trap. She waited through the hyperspace jump and through the ship's night cycle and into the next morning. Nothing terrible happened. Days passed. Then weeks. Daeha asked her to help with small tasks around the ship, monitoring communication channels while he slept, checking cargo manifests for their delivery contracts, basic maintenance that required small hands and careful attention. At first, Yanhua assumed this was the beginning of servitude, but Daeho thanked her for every task completed and never assigned anything without asking if she was willing. He taught her a human card game called poker and seemed genuinely delighted when she beat him 3 hands in a row. He shared meals with her at the tiny galley table and asked questions about her life that no one had ever thought to ask. "What did you do before?" he asked one evening over. "Reconstituted noodles." "Before what?" "Before you spent all your time being treated like a burden." Yanhua considered the question. "Studied," she said finally. "Languages, history, mathematics, strategy, military strategy, economic strategy, political strategy," she clarified. "I thought perhaps if I could be useful enough, my family would overlook my deficiency." "Did it work?" "No." Daeho nodded slowly. "Their loss," he said, and went back to eating his noodles. Yanhua did not know what to do with a statement like that. 3 weeks into their journey, the Silent Roar docked at Meridian Station for supplies and refueling. Daeho left Yanhua on the ship while he handled transactions, explaining that stations could be dangerous for anyone unfamiliar with their customs. She monitored communications out of habit while he was gone. That was how she heard the pirate attack beginning. The first explosion rocked the station's outer ring. Emergency alerts flooded every channel. The sorry rating party had breached the docking sector, and they were moving fast. Yanhua tried to reach Daeho on his communicator, but interference from the attack was blocking signals. She could see station security cameras through the ship's connection to Meridian's network. She could see the pirates spreading Through the corridors, she could see Deho, trapped in a market square with a dozen civilians, pinned down behind overturned stalls, while the sorry raiders closed in from 3 directions. He was going to die, and his mind went very quiet and very fast. She had studied strategy her entire life, waiting for a chance to prove her worth. The station systems were antiquated, but functional security doors could be remotely triggered. Fire suppression systems could create diversions. The pirates were operating in a pattern she recognized from historical Dasari tactics, which meant she could predict their movements. Her fingers flew across the ship's communication panel. She jury-rigged a connection through the station's emergency broadcast system, cutting through the interference. Deho, can you hear me? Static. Then his voice, breathing hard. Yanwa, what are you doing on this channel? I can see the entire station. She said, I'm going to guide you out. You are what? The corridor behind you connects to a service tunnel in 30 meters. There is a security door I can seal once you are through. How do you know that? Because I can see it. Yanwa said, move now. You have 12 seconds before the Eastern group rounds the corner. There was a pause. Then Deho started moving. Yanwa watched through cameras as he gathered the civilians and led them toward the corridor she had indicated. She sealed the security door behind them 3 seconds before the pirates reached it. Next junction. Turn left, she instructed. There is a group of 6 ahead, but I am about to trigger fire suppression in their section. The sprinklers activated, filling the corridor with chemical foam that obscured vision and made the floor slippery. The pirates stumbled and cursed the day, and the civilians slipped past through an adjacent hallway for 23 minutes. Yanwa guided them through the station. She anticipated pirate movements before they happened, recognized patterns in their search protocols, found gaps in their coverage that should not have existed but did because the Zari were overconfident. She routed Deho around ambush and through maintenance shafts and finally back to the docking bay where the silent roar waited. He burst through the airlock with the civilians behind him, shouting for her to seal the ship. Yanwa had already started the undocking sequence. They were away from the station before the pirates realized their prey had escaped later, after the civilians had been delivered to a rescue vessel and the silent roar was safely in hyperspace. Deho found Yanwa still sitting at the communication panel. Her hands were shaking. How did you do that? He asked. Do what? See everything. Predict everything. Guide us through that mess without a single wrong turn. Yanwa stared at her trembling fingers. I do not know, she admitted. I could see the patterns. I could understand how they would move before they moved. That is not nothing, Deho said. That is a gift. It is not psychic ability. No. It is better, he replied. Psychic ability tells you what people are thinking right now. Your mind tells you what they are going to do next. Yanwa looked up at him. My people would not consider that valuable. Your people are idiots, Deho said flatly. I am not. He sat down across from her and leaned forward. I'm going to make you an offer, he said. Not a command. Not an expectation. An offer you can refuse. What offer? Stay on the silent roar as my tactical partner. Deho said, equal pay. Equal say in which contracts we take. Equal everything. You want me to work with you. I want you to work with me because you saved my life today and the lives of 12 strangers. Deho said, not because you owed me anything, but because you saw people in danger and you used what you had to help them. Yanwa felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Took her a moment to recognize it as hope. I accept, she said. Deho smiled, and it transformed his scarred face into something almost warm. Good, he said. Now let me show you where we keep the good coffee. Because partners do not drink that reconstituted garbage I have been serving you for the first time since leaving Valorian space. Yanwa laughed. It was a small sound, rusty from disuse, but it was real and somewhere in the back of her mind. She began to understand that the defect her people had seen in her was not a defect at all. It was simply a different kind of strength. One that had been waiting her entire life for someone to recognize it. Kandeho noticed the assassins 3 seconds before they moved. He had been standing near the back of the Grand Hall, arms crossed, watching the Valorian diplomatic summit with the bored expression of a man who was only here because his contract required it. The trade delegation he protected was minor, barely worth the attention of the glittering alien nobles who filled the chamber with their silk robes and psychic whispers, but Deho watched everything. That was what kept humans alive in a galaxy that considered them primitive newcomers. The 3 Valorians near the eastern pillar moved with too much purpose. Their hands drifted toward concealed weapons, their eyes fixed on a single target. Prince Xianwu, third in line to the throne, stood on the raised platform, addressing the assembly about trade tariffs and border agreements. He had no idea he was about to die. Dea moved. He crossed 40 meters of polished stone floor in the time it took the first assassin to draw his blade. The Valorians were tall and graceful, their movements fluid like water. But Deho was a human from Earth, a death world where gravity crushed bones and predators, hunted in packs, and survival meant being faster and more brutal than anything that wanted to kill you. He hit the first assassin from behind, snapping his neck with a twist that made nearby nobles scream. The second assassin turned, blade raised, and Deho caught his wrist and broke it before driving his palm into the alien's throat. The third assassin managed to throw his knife toward the Prince. Deha intercepted it with his own body, taking the blade in his shoulder, then ripped it free and buried it in the assassin's chest. The entire attack lasted 6 seconds. Grand Hall fell silent. Prince Xianwu stared down at the human who knelt among 3 dead Valorians, blood running down his arm. Breathing hard but very much alive, the nobles backed away from Deho like he was a wild animal that had somehow gotten loose in their pristine gathering. "You saved my life," Xianwu said, his voice carrying the harmonic resonance that marked Valorian royalty. Deho stood slowly, pulling a cloth from his pocket to press against his wound. Seemed like the right thing to do. The prince descended from the platform, his advisors fluttering around him like panicked birds. Valorian honor code was ancient and absolute. When someone saved a royal life, a debt was owed. The greater the service, the greater the reward, and there was no greater service than preserving royal blood. "You are human," Xianwu observed, as if this complicated matter significantly. "Last time I checked, the life debt must be paid." One of the advisors hissed, though he looked physically ill at the prospect. "Our traditions demanded." Xianwu studied the human before him. Deho was not tall by human standards, but he was built like a compressed spring. All dense muscle and quick reflexes. His face showed no fear, no awe, no particular respect for the royal presence, just calm assessment. "What is your name, human?" "Kang Deho, freelance security contractor. You will be rewarded." "Kang Deho," Xianwu announced, loud enough for the assembly to hear. "The Valorian Empire pays its debts." The advisors huddled together, whispering furiously. Dea could catch fragments of their conversation, even without psychic abilities. They were terrified a human had saved the Prince Protocol, demanded a reward of tremendous value, but giving a human anything meaningful was unthinkable. To them, their species had only recently achieved spaceflight. They were violent and unpredictable. They came from a world so dangerous that other species wondered how anything survived there at all. Xianwu listened to his advisors, and slowly a smile spread across his elegant features. Dea did not like that smile. "I have decided," the prince announced. "For the service of preserving my life, I grant you the greatest gift within my personal power to give." The hall went quiet again. "I grant you my sister, Princess Yanwa, to be your wife or concubine as you see fit." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Deha's expression did not change, but something cold settled behind his eyes. Your sister. She will be brought before you now, Xianwu continued, waving to servants near a side entrance. I confess this arrangement benefits us both. Human. How so? My sister was born without psychic abilities, Xianwu explained, his tone carrying the weight of profound disappointment. Among our people, this is considered a defect of the highest order. You are giving me a person because you think something is wrong with her. I am honoring you with a princess of the royal blood. Xianwu corrected smoothly. That her value among our people is diminished does not change her lineage. The side doors opened. A young Valorian woman walked into the grand hall with perfect posture and an expressionless face. Princess Yanhua was beautiful in the way all Valorians were beautiful, with luminous skin and large dark eyes and hair that fell like black silk past her shoulders. But where other Valorians moved with casual arrogance, she walked with the careful dignity of someone who had learned to expect cruelty and refused to let it break her. The nobles watched her pass with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. Yanhua kept her eyes forward. She had clearly done this walk before, endured this gauntlet of judgment many times. She stopped before her brother and bowed precisely as protocol demanded. Brother, she said. Sister, Xianwu replied. This human saved my life today, and I have chosen you as his reward. Something flickered in Yanhua's eyes. Pain. Perhaps, or resignation. I understand, she said. I will gather my belongings. That will not be necessary, Xianwu said. You may take nothing from the palace, as you are no longer part of our household. I see. Yanhua turned to face Dehosh, was tall for a Valorian female, which meant she stood nearly eye to eye with the human mercenary. I am yours, she said, and the words clearly cost her something to speak. What would you have me do? Deho looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Prince Xianwu, and he looked at the assembled nobles who watched this transaction with mild interest, as if a prince's being given away like unwanted furniture was perfectly normal. No, Deho said. The hall went silent for the third time. I beg your pardon, Xianwu said, his harmonic sharpening with displeasure. I said no. You refuse my gift. I refuse to take a person as property. Deho said, where I come from, we stopped doing that a long time ago, and we are not proud that we ever did it at all. The nobles exchanged confused glances. Valorian society operated on hierarchy and obligation. The concept of refusing a royal gift was almost incomprehensible. You insult me, Xianwu said, his voice dangerous now. I'm trying very hard not to. Deho replied, but I will not own another person. He turned to Yanhua, which made several guards step forward nervously. What do you want? He asked. Yanhua stared at him. No one had ever asked her that question. I do not understand. If you could go anywhere, do anything, what would you want? The princess was silent for so long that Xianwu began to speak, but Deho held up a hand to stop him. Finally, Yanhua answered. I would want to leave this place, she said, and never return. Deho nodded and turned back to the prince. Here are my terms, he said. I accept your sister as my reward, but not as property. Then as what? As a passenger on my ship, until she decides what she wants to do with her life. That is the same thing. It is very much not the same thing, Deho said. She stays with me until she chooses otherwise. And when she chooses otherwise, I help her build whatever life she wants. Xianwu considered this, then shrugged. The human had saddled himself with a defective Valorian and called it honor. Let him learn the burden he had accepted. Agreed. The prince said, take her and go. Deho offered his hand to Yanhua, looked at it without understanding. It means I'm asking you to come with me, he explained, not telling you. Slowly, hesitantly, Yanhua placed her hand in his. Her fingers were cold as they walked out of the grand hall together. Neither of them looked back, but if Xianwu had been paying attention, He might have noticed something important for the first time in her life. Princess Yongwa did not look like a burden being disposed of. She looked like a person who had just been offered something she never expected to receive: a choice.